The stars had always been cold and silent, but on that day, they brought visitors that would change everything. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the United Earth Command Station, her hands clasped behind her back. She watched the swirling blue marble of Earth below, the planet that had given birth to humanity. 12 billion souls lived down there, going about their daily lives. They had no idea what was coming. Her communicator buzzed. "Admiral, you need to see this, now." She made her way to the command center with quick, measured steps. The room was filled with officers, all of them staring at the main display screen with pale faces. Some had their mouths open. Others had forgotten to breathe. "Report," Vasquez said. Commander James Park turned to face her. His hands were shaking. "They came out of nowhere, Admiral." One moment space was empty. The next, he pointed at the screen. Vasquez looked. Her heart stopped for just a moment. Ships, thousands of them. No, not thousands. The computer was still counting, and the number kept climbing. 5,000, 7,000, 10,000. The vessels were massive, each one the size of a small moon. They blocked out the stars like a dark curtain being drawn across the sky. 10,000 warships, Park whispered. And they're still coming. Vasquez had served in the military for 30 years. She had faced pirates, rebels, and hostile alien species, but she had never seen anything like this. The fleet before her was larger than every human ship ever built, combined and multiplied by 10. "Who are they?" she asked. Her voice did not shake. She would not allow it. "We're receiving a transmission," another officer called out. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies. Every human colony is receiving this right now. Put it through." The screen flickered. A face appeared. It was not human. The creature had gray skin that looked like old leather. Its eyes were large and yellow, with vertical slits for pupils. A crown of bone rose from its skull, decorated with strange symbols that glowed with soft light. When it spoke, its voice was deep and cold, like stones grinding together in the dark. "I am High Overlord Zyreth of the Dominion of Vethkar. I speak to the species known as humans." The alien paused, letting its words sink in. "Your expansion into the galaxy has been noted. Your presence has been tolerated. But tolerance has its limits. The Dominion has ruled these stars for 50,000 years. We have watched younger species rise and fall like waves upon the shore. Some were wise. They submitted. They served. They survived." Zyreth's lips curled back, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Others were foolish. They resisted. They fought. They died. The screen showed images now. Ruined worlds. Burning cities. Species that Vasquez had never seen. Screaming as Dominion weapons reduced them to ash. The Kravik. The Morleth. The 7 clans of Urith. 17 species have defied the Dominion. 17 species no longer exist. Their worlds are dust. Their names are forgotten. They are nothing. Zyreth leaned closer to the camera. His yellow eyes seemed to burn. "You have 72 hours to surrender. Every human world will submit to Dominion rule. Your species will become our servants. You will work. You will obey. You will live." The alien straightened up. "Or you will become the 18th name on our list of extinct species. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. There will only be submission. Or death." The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center. Vasquez could hear her own heartbeat. "Admiral?" Park's voice cracked. "What do we do?" Vasquez did not answer immediately. She stared at the screen, at the endless rows of alien warships. Each one of those vessels could destroy a city with a single shot, and there were 10,000 of them. "Contact every colony," she said finally. "Emergency priority. Tell them to prepare for evacuation." "Evacuation?" Park's eyes went wide. "To where?" Vasquez looked at him. "Everywhere. Nowhere. We scatter. We hide. We survive." She turned to face the rest of her officers. "Get me a line to the United Terran Congress. We have a lot to discuss." The next 12 hours were chaos. News of the alien ultimatum spread across human space like wildfire. People panicked. Markets crashed. Governments called emergency sessions. Religious leaders spoke of the end times. Some people prayed. Others rioted. Many simply held their loved ones and waited. The United Terran Congress met in Geneva, in a building that had stood for 300 years. Presidents, prime ministers, and representatives from all 12 human colonies, filled the great hall. They shouted at each other. They blamed each other. They demanded answers that no one could give. Admiral Vasquez stood at the podium, waiting for silence. It took a long time to come. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I will not waste your time with pretty words. The situation is simple. The Dominion of Vethkar controls over 3,000 star systems. Their military forces outnumber ours by a factor of 50 to 1. Their technology is centuries ahead of our own. By any conventional measure, we cannot win this fight." The hall erupted in noise. Some leaders called for immediate surrender. Others demanded that Vasquez be removed from command. A few simply wept. Silence. The voice of Chancellor Marcus Webb cut through the chaos. He was an old man, but his voice still carried power. "Let the Admiral finish." Vasquez nodded her thanks. "I said we cannot win by conventional measures. But humans have never been conventional, have we?" She pressed a button on the podium. A holographic display appeared, showing a complex diagram. "What I am about to show you is classified at the highest level. Only 7 people in human history have known about this. It is called the Scattering Protocol, and it was designed for exactly this situation." The display showed human space, the 12 colony worlds connected by trade routes and supply lines. Then it changed. The colonies disappeared, breaking apart into thousands of tiny dots that spread across the entire galaxy. For 200 years, in absolute secrecy, humanity has been preparing for the day when we might face an enemy we could not defeat in open battle. We have built hidden bases in asteroids, in the hearts of gas giants, in the empty spaces between stars. We have created ships that can go dark for years at a time, surviving on minimal power. We have stockpiled weapons, supplies, and technology in places no one would ever think to look. A murmur went through the crowd. The Dominion expects us to fight like the species they have conquered before. They expect us to gather our forces and face them in a glorious last stand. They expect us to be predictable. Vasquez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We will not give them what they expect." Chancellor Webb leaned forward. "What exactly are you proposing, Admiral?" "I am proposing that we abandon Earth. Abandon all our colonies. Let the Dominion take our empty worlds, and while they wonder where we went, while they search for us in the places they expect to find us, we will be everywhere else. We will be in their supply lines, in their shipyards, in their colonies. We will be a ghost that haunts them, a wound that never heals. We will make them pay for every inch of our territory in blood." "You're talking about guerrilla warfare," a young representative said. "On a galactic scale." "I am talking about survival," Vasquez replied. "The Dominion has conquered species that stood and fought. They have never faced a species that refused to play by their rules. They don't know how to fight an enemy they cannot find. They don't know how to kill an idea." The debate lasted for hours. Many leaders refused to accept the plan. They could not imagine abandoning their homes, their cities, their worlds. Some called Vasquez a coward. Others called her insane. But in the end, they ran out of options. The vote was close, but the Scattering Protocol was approved. The next 60 hours were the largest migration in human history. 12 billion people had to be moved. It was impossible. It could not be done. Humanity did it anyway. Cargo ships, passenger vessels, mining transports, and personal yachts, everything that could fly was pressed into service. Families grabbed what they could carry and left everything else behind. Children cried as they were separated from their pets. Old people looked at their homes one last time, knowing they would never return. The evacuation was messy and chaotic. People were packed into ships designed for a fraction of their number. Some vessels broke down, others got lost. Thousands of people died in the confusion, but billions survived. They scattered into the void, following coordinates that led them to hidden refuges that most of them had never known existed. Admiral Vasquez remained on Earth until the last possible moment. She watched the cities empty, the highways clog with vehicles heading to spaceports, the lights go out one by one. In 72 hours, the planet that had given birth to her species became a ghost world. She was the last human to leave. As her shuttle rose into the sky, Vasquez looked down at the blue marble growing smaller beneath her. She thought about all the history that planet held, the pyramids, the Great Wall, the first steps on the moon. All of it would soon be in alien hands. "Ma'am," her pilot said, "the 72 hours are almost up. The Dominion is expecting our response." Vasquez nodded slowly. Open a channel. All frequencies. The communication officer's fingers danced across his console. Channel open, Admiral. Broadcasting to the entire Dominion fleet. Vasquez took a deep breath. Then she smiled. High Overlord Xyrith, you demanded our surrender. You gave us 72 hours to make our choice. She paused. We have made it. On the main screen, she could see the Dominion flagship. She imagined Xyrith watching, waiting for the words of submission he expected to hear. You see, Xyrith, you made a mistake. A big one. You studied our ships. You counted our weapons. You measured our territory. But you never studied us. You never understood what humans are. She leaned forward, her eyes hard as steel. We are the species that walked out of caves with nothing but rocks and sharp sticks. We conquered our world. We split the atom. We touched the stars. We have faced extinction a dozen times. And every single time, we have refused to die. On the screen, she saw the Dominion fleet beginning to move forward. You want our worlds? Take them. They're empty. You want our surrender? You'll never get it. You want to destroy us? Vasquez laughed. It was a genuine laugh, filled with dark humor. Better species than you have tried. She raised her hand, middle finger extended, in a gesture as old as human defiance. Come and take it. She cut the transmission. Across human space, in hidden bases and darkened ships, billions of people heard their admiral's words. Some laughed with her. Others cried. Many did both at the same time. They were afraid. Of course they were afraid. They had lost their homes, their worlds, everything they had known. They were facing an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations, but they were also angry. And angry humans, as history had proven time and again, were the most dangerous things in the universe. High Overlord Xyrith received the transmission in his throne room aboard the flagship Eternal Dominion. He watched the human female make her gesture, heard her mocking words. For a long moment, he simply stared at the screen. What was that gesture? He asked his aide. Unknown, High Overlord. Human records indicate it is a sign of disrespect. Xyrith's eyes narrowed. In 50,000 years of Dominion history, no conquered species had ever responded to an ultimatum with insults. They begged for mercy. They offered treasures. They surrendered with dignity or died with pride. But this was something new. They are fools, he decided. Brave fools, perhaps, but fools nonetheless. Order the fleet to advance. We will crush their worlds and teach them the price of defiance. Yes, High Overlord. The Dominion fleet moved like a dark tide across the stars. They reached Earth first, the human homeworld. Xyrith expected to find desperate defenders, last-ditch resistance, something worthy of a conquest. He found nothing. The cities were empty. The military bases abandoned. The only resistance came from automated defense systems that fought with mindless determination. They destroyed a few hundred Dominion fighters before they were silenced. Xyrith walked through the empty streets of a city the humans had called New York. His boots echoed on the deserted pavement. Wind blew through broken windows, carrying papers and dust. Where are they? He demanded. Where are the humans? His scanners found nothing. Orbital surveys found nothing. Deep space sensors found nothing. 12 billion people had vanished. Over the following weeks, the Dominion conquered all 12 human colonies. Every single one was empty. The humans had taken everything useful, food, weapons, technology, even personal items, and left only shells behind. Xyrith's commanders were confused. His advisors were worried. His soldiers grew restless, itching for a fight that never came. They are cowards, Xyrith declared in a speech to his fleet. They have fled like vermin from a burning nest. We will find their holes. We will dig them out, and we will make them pay for their disrespect. But finding the humans proved harder than expected. Space is vast beyond imagining. Between the stars, there is nothing but emptiness, endless, silent, and dark. A ship running on minimal power, drifting with its engines cold and its lights dim, is almost impossible to detect. The Dominion search parties found nothing. Their scouts returned empty-handed. Their sensors reported only silence. Meanwhile, the humans watched. From hidden bases and camouflaged stations, they observed their enemy. They studied Dominion patrol routes, noted weaknesses in their supply lines, and waited for the right moment. The first strike came 3 weeks after the conquest. A Dominion supply convoy was traveling through a quiet sector of space. 40 transport ships carried food, weapons, and ammunition to the occupation forces on Earth. They had a modest escort of 8 warships, more than enough. The commanders believed. For a peaceful sector. They were wrong. The attack came from nowhere. Small, fast ships appeared out of the darkness, their weapons blazing. They were not military vessels, they were converted freighters, mining ships, personal yachts armed with jury-rigged weapons. But they struck with surgical precision, targeting the convoy's engines and leaving the escort scrambling. The battle lasted 12 minutes. When it was over, 30 transport ships were crippled or destroyed. The humans took what supplies they could carry and vanished back into the void before Dominion reinforcements could arrive. The escort commander survived long enough to report what had happened. His last transmission, before his damaged ship exploded, was simple. They came from everywhere. They were invisible. And they were laughing. Xyrith received the news in silence. For the first time in his long life, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. The humans were not running. They were hunting. And this was only the beginning. Across the former territories of humanity, similar attacks began to occur. Dominion patrols were ambushed. Military installations were sabotaged. Communication relays were destroyed. Each attack ended with the same message, broadcast on all frequencies. We are everywhere. We are nowhere. And we do not forget. The galaxy watched with growing interest. Other species, long subjugated by the Dominion, heard the stories. They whispered to each other in the dark, speaking of the strange species that had refused to kneel. The species that fought like ghosts. The species that laughed. And in her hidden command center, orbiting a rogue planet in the empty space between stars, Admiral Elena Vasquez received reports of each successful operation. She marked them on a map that showed the entire galaxy. A map covered with thousands of tiny points of light. Each point was a human cell. A group of fighters. A pocket of resistance. The Dominion thought they had won. They thought the war was over. They were about to learn that for humans, the war had just begun. Vasquez looked at the map and smiled. It was not a nice smile. They wanted a surrender, she said softly. We're going to give them something much better. We're going to give them a war they'll never forget. And somewhere in the cold depths of space, human ships drifted in the darkness, waiting for their next chance to strike. The first chapter of humanity's greatest war had been written, but the story was far from over. 6 months had passed since the fall of Earth. High Overlord Xyrith stood in what had once been the United Nations building in Geneva, the Great Hall, where humanity's leaders had once debated and decided the fate of their species, was now his personal throne room. Dominion banners hung from the walls. Dominion soldiers guarded every door, but the victory felt hollow. Report, Xyrith commanded. His chief military advisor, a thin creature named Veth, stepped forward with obvious reluctance. High Overlord, the situation remains challenging. Speak plainly, Veth swallowed. In the past month, we have lost 47 supply convoys, 18 patrol ships, 2 communications hubs. The sabotage at Shipyard 7 has delayed construction by 3 months. And, he hesitated, and we still have no idea where the humans are hiding. Xyrith's clawed hand gripped the armrest of his throne hard enough to crack the stone. We control their worlds. We have their technology. We have 10,000 warships searching every corner of this sector. How can one primitive species hide from us? Veth had no answer. The truth was simple, though Xyrith refused to accept it. The Dominion had conquered species before. They had experience with resistance movements, with rebels who fought from the shadows. But those species had always fought to reclaim their territory. They had bases on their homeworlds, connections to their people, roots that could be found and destroyed. The humans had no roots. They had torn themselves free from everything they knew and scattered into the infinite darkness of space. They were not fighting to reclaim Earth. They were fighting to make the Dominion bleed. And they were very, very good at it. Far from Dominion space, in a hidden base carved into an asteroid, Admiral Elena Vasquez reviewed the same reports with a very different reaction. 47 convoys, she said, a hint of pride in her voice. Not bad for 6 months of work. Commander Marcus Chen stood across from her, his uniform patched and worn. He was young for his rank, barely 30 years old, but the war had aged him quickly. There were lines on his face that had not been there before, and his eyes held a hardness that came from seeing too much death. "It's not enough," he said. "We're hurting them, yes, but we're not stopping them. They're building new ships faster than we can destroy them. At this rate, we'll run out of fighters before they run out of targets." Vasquez nodded slowly. "You're right. The current strategy is sustainable, but it won't win us the war. We need something bigger." "Like what?" She pulled up a holographic display. It showed the structure of the Dominion Empire, 3,000 worlds connected by trade routes and military supply lines. At key points throughout the network, strange symbols pulsed with soft light. "Do you know what these are?" Chen studied the display. "They look like some kind of infrastructure. Power stations. Close, but more important. They're called the Pillars of Authority. Ancient technology that the Dominion didn't build, they inherited it from a species they conquered long ago. These pillars are the backbone of everything the Dominion does. Faster than light communication, navigation, fleet coordination. Take them out, and the entire empire becomes deaf, blind, and confused." Chen's eyes widened. "How many are there?" 200 spread across their territory, and every single one of them is heavily guarded. So hitting them would be impossible. Vasquez smiled. Impossible is just a word people use when they haven't figured out the solution yet. But you're right, we can't hit them now. We're not ready. We need more time, more resources, more allies. She closed the display. "That's where you come in." "Me? I'm giving you command of the Defiant Hope. Your mission is reconnaissance and recruitment. I need you to map Dominion territory, identify weaknesses, and make friends wherever you can." Chen frowned. "Friends? Who would be crazy enough to ally with us? The Dominion has conquered hundreds of species over the centuries. They call them servitor races, slaves. Essentially, those species have served in silence for generations, but they haven't forgotten what freedom feels like." Vasquez's eyes gleamed. "Find them. Talk to them. Show them that resistance is possible." Chen was silent for a moment, processing the enormity of what she was asking. Then he straightened up and saluted. "I won't let you down, Admiral. I know you won't. Now get going. You have a galaxy to explore." The Defiant Hope was not an impressive ship. It was a converted cargo freighter, held together by patches, prayers, and stubbornness. Its hull was scarred from a dozen battles. Its engines wheezed like an old man climbing stairs. Its weapons systems were a patchwork of stolen Dominion tech and human ingenuity. But its crew loved it. Chen's team was small, just 23 people, each one a survivor of the scattering. There was Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, the pilot, who could make the old ship dance like a fighter. There was Sergeant Boris Petrov, the weapons officer, a giant of a man with a laugh that could shake the walls. There was Dr. Amara Okafor, the medic, whose gentle hands had saved more lives than she could count. They were not soldiers. Before the war, they had been teachers, engineers, doctors, artists. But necessity had transformed them into warriors, and they had learned to fight with everything they had. Their first mission took them to a Dominion mining colony on a barren moon called Keth 4. The colony was worked by a species called the Morath Small, insectoid creatures that had been enslaved by the Dominion for over 1,000 years. The Defiant Hope approached carefully, running dark with minimal power. Tanaka guided them through a debris field that hid them from Dominion sensors. They landed in a crater far from the main colony, and Chen led a small team on foot to make contact. The Morath were terrified at first. They had never seen humans before, but they knew the stories, the strange species that had defied the Dominion and vanished like smoke. Some thought the humans were ghosts. Others thought they were a trap. Chen spoke to their leader, an elder named Chitik, through a universal translator. "We are not ghosts," he said. "We are refugees, like you. We lost our homes, just like you. The only difference is that we chose to fight back." Chitik's compound eyes studied him carefully. "The Dominion is too powerful. They have crushed every rebellion in their history. What makes you think you can succeed where so many have failed? Because we don't fight the way they expect. We don't meet them in open battle. We strike from the shadows and disappear before they can respond. We're patient. We're careful. And we never, ever give up." Chen leaned forward. "The Dominion thinks they've won. They think the war is over. But we're just getting started. And when we finally make our move, we want you to be ready." Chitik was silent for a long moment. Then he made a gesture that the translator interpreted as agreement. The Morath have served in chains for 1,000 years. We have forgotten what freedom tastes like. His eyes seemed to glow with a faint light. Teach us to remember. It was the first of many such conversations. Over the following months, the Defiant Hope traveled across Dominion space, moving carefully to avoid detection. They visited mining colonies and factory worlds, agricultural planets and prison moons. Everywhere they went, they found species that had been crushed under the Dominion's heel. The Kralith, massive reptilian creatures forced to work in the Empire's shipyards. The Sylvani, graceful beings of light and energy, imprisoned in special containment fields and used to power Dominion technology. The Vorn, warrior people whose planet had been destroyed and whose survivors had been scattered as slave labor across the Empire. Each species had their own history of pain and loss. Each had their own reasons to hate the Dominion. And each, when approached by Chen and his crew, listened with growing hope. Not all of them agreed to help. Many were too afraid, too beaten down by centuries of oppression to believe that resistance was possible. But enough said yes. Enough were willing to take the risk. A network began to form. Hidden communication channels, secret supply caches, cells of resistance fighters, waiting for the signal to act. The Dominion remained oblivious. They were too busy dealing with the human insurgency to notice the whispers spreading among their slaves. Meanwhile, the attacks continued. Every week, somewhere in Dominion space, something exploded. A supply convoy would be ambushed. A fuel depot would catch fire. A military commander would be assassinated in his own quarters. The humans had become ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing without trace. They used weapons they had built themselves, ships they had salvaged from junkyards, tactics they had invented on the fly. They were outgunned and outnumbered at every turn, but they kept fighting, and they kept winning. Not big victories, no decisive battles, no conquered territory, but 1,000 small cuts that slowly bled the Dominion dry. High Overlord Xyrith grew increasingly frustrated. He executed commanders who failed to catch the human insurgents. He doubled patrols, tripled security, implemented curfews and crackdowns across all occupied human territory. Nothing worked. They're like water, one of his generals complained. Every time we try to grab them, they slip through our fingers. Xyrith's response was to execute the general for defeatism. But privately, even he was beginning to worry. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. Their previous conquests had followed a pattern. Arrive with overwhelming force, crush initial resistance, occupy territory, subjugate population. It had worked for 50,000 years. But the humans had broken the pattern. They had abandoned their territory rather than defend it. They had scattered rather than surrender. They had turned the vastness of space, which should have been their weakness, into their greatest strength. And worst of all, they seemed to be enjoying themselves. Reports came in of human prisoners laughing during interrogation, of human ships broadcasting jokes and insults before attacks, of human graffiti appearing on Dominion installations, mocking the Empire and its leaders. One particularly memorable incident involved a Dominion admiral who woke to find his flagship's exterior painted with a crude image of Xyrith wearing what humans apparently called a clown nose. The admiral was so embarrassed that he refused to return to port for 3 months. Xyrith did not find it funny. They mock us, he snarled during a war council. They have lost everything, their homes, their worlds, their civilization, and still they mock us. How is this possible? None of his advisors had an answer. The truth was that the humans were not mocking the Dominion out of strength. They were doing it out of survival. In the dark spaces between stars, in cramped ships and hidden bases, human refugees struggled to maintain hope. They had lost everything. Many had watched family members die during the evacuation. Some had been separated from loved ones and had no idea if they were still alive. The humor was a defense mechanism, a way of saying, we refuse to be broken. A reminder that no matter how bad things got, they were still human. Admiral Vasquez understood this better than anyone. She had seen her own family killed during a Dominion bombardment of a refugee convoy. She had buried friends, mentors, students. She had watched humanity's brightest hopes die in fire and silence. But she had not stopped laughing, because laughter, she had realized, was a weapon. It told the enemy that they had not won. It told her own people that there was still something worth fighting for. It kept the darkness at bay, even when the darkness seemed absolute. They don't understand us, she told her officers during a strategy meeting. They've conquered species that fought with pride and died with dignity. They've never faced a species that fights with jokes and refuses to take them seriously. It confuses them, and confused enemies make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? Commander Chen asked. The kind we can exploit. Vasquez pulled up a star map. Our intelligence network has been gathering data for months. We now have detailed information on every pillar of authority in the Dominion Empire. We know their defenses. We know their weaknesses. We know exactly how to destroy them. The room went silent. You're serious, Chen said. Completely. We've spent 6 months building our strength, recruiting allies, learning how the Dominion works. Now it's time to move to the next phase. Vasquez's eyes swept across her officers. We're going to hit all 200 pillars simultaneously. When they fall, the Dominion's ability to coordinate their forces will be crippled. Their fleets will be isolated. Their communications will be dark. And that's when we strike. All 200 at once? Lieutenant Tanaka looked skeptical. We don't have the forces for that. We do now. Vasquez smiled. Did you think you were the only ones recruiting allies, Commander Chen? While you were building our network among the servitor species, I've been doing the same with the human cells scattered across the galaxy. We have over 3,000 active resistance groups now. Add in the allies we've recruited, and we have enough people to hit every target. Chen whistled softly. You've been planning this all along, from the very beginning. The scattering wasn't just about survival. It was about positioning. We've spent 6 months putting our pieces into place. Now, she pressed a button, and the star map lit up with 200 glowing points. Now we're ready to play. There was a long silence as the officers absorbed the scope of what she was proposing. Then Petrov laughed. It was his big, booming laugh that could shake walls. By God, he said. We're actually going to do it, aren't we? We're going to bring down an empire. That's the plan, Vasquez said. But first, we have a lot of work to do. The attack is scheduled for 8 months from now. That gives us time to finalize our plans, coordinate with our allies, and make sure every team knows exactly what they need to do. 8 months, Chen murmured. It feels like a long time. It will pass quickly. Trust me. Vasquez looked out at the stars visible through the observation port. The Dominion has had their way for 50,000 years. We're going to end that run in a single day. The meeting ended with assignments and action items. Officers scattered to their duties, each carrying the weight of knowledge that the war was about to change. Chen lingered behind. He had a question that had been bothering him for months. Admiral, can I ask you something? Of course. Back on Earth, when you received the ultimatum. When you laughed. He paused. Were you afraid? Vasquez was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than usual. I was terrified. I looked at those ships and knew we couldn't possibly win. I thought about my family, my friends, everyone I would lose. She turned to face him. But then, I thought about all the species the Dominion had crushed. All the civilizations that had surrendered and lost everything anyway. And I realized that if we were going to die, I'd rather die fighting. I'd rather die laughing in their faces than crying at their feet. And now? Are you still afraid? Every single day. She smiled, and there was sadness in it, but also determination. But I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what needs to be done despite the fear. And what needs to be done right now is save our species. So that's what I'm going to do. Chen nodded slowly. Thank you, Admiral. That's what I needed to hear. Get some rest, Commander. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Chen saluted and left. Vasquez stood alone in the empty meeting room, surrounded by star maps and battle plans. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her shoulders like a physical force. 8 months. 8 months until the largest coordinated military operation in galactic history. 8 months until they struck at the heart of an empire that had ruled for 50,000 years. So many things could go wrong. So many people would die. But for the first time since the war began, Vasquez allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten. Hope. Somewhere out there, hidden among the stars, billions of humans waited for their chance. Billions of former slaves prepared for rebellion. Billions of voices whispered in the darkness, passing along the word, the humans are coming back. And this time, they're bringing friends. Zyrith would not understand until it was too late. He would dismiss the warnings, ignore the signs, cling to his belief that the Dominion was invincible. That was fine with Vasquez. Overconfident enemies were the easiest kind to beat. She turned off the lights and made her way to her quarters. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The war for the galaxy was about to enter its final phase. 3 years had passed since the fall of Earth. The war that everyone expected to end quickly had become something else entirely. It had become a wound that refused to heal. A fire that could not be extinguished. A nightmare that haunted the Dominion's every waking moment. Commander Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiant Hope, watching a Dominion patrol ship burn in the void. The flames were silent in the vacuum of space, but he could imagine the screams of the crew inside. Once, that thought would have bothered him. Now, after 3 years of war, he felt nothing but grim satisfaction. All targets destroyed, Lieutenant Tanaka reported from the pilot's seat. Enemy reinforcements are 20 minutes out. We should go. Agreed. Set course for Rally Point 7. Best speed. The Defiant Hope turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been a Dominion supply convoy. 30 transport ships destroyed. Enough food and ammunition to supply an occupation force for 3 months. Now nothing but floating debris. It was their 47th successful raid. Chen had stopped counting the kills long ago. The war had changed everything. The humans who had fled Earth as frightened refugees had become something harder. They had learned to fight without mercy, to strike without warning, to kill without hesitation. They had lost their homes, their families, their entire way of life. All they had left was the war, and they had become very, very good at it. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out every day. Human raiders attacked Dominion targets, seized supplies, freed prisoners, and disappeared before retaliation could arrive. They were everywhere and nowhere, a ghost army that haunted the Empire's nightmares. But the cost was terrible. For every victory, there were losses. Ships destroyed, comrades killed, friends who went on missions and never came back. Chen had watched too many funerals, read too many letters to grieving families. The war was winning, slowly, but it was eating them alive in the process. And the Dominion was adapting. High Overlord Xyrith had finally begun to take the threat seriously. He had reassigned his best commanders to the hunt for human insurgents. He had developed new detection systems, new patrol patterns, new countermeasures. The raids were becoming more dangerous, the escapes more narrow. Chen knew they were running out of time. The Defiant Hope reached Rally Point 7, a hidden base carved into an asteroid in a system so remote that it had no name, only a number. The base was one of hundreds scattered across the galaxy. Tiny outposts where human fighters could rest, repair, and resupply before heading back into battle. Chen stepped off his ship and was immediately met by a young officer with urgent news. Sir, Admiral Vasquez wants to speak with you. Priority 1. He made his way to the communications room, a cramped space filled with salvaged equipment and flickering screens. Vasquez's face appeared on the main display, her features worn but determined. Commander Chen, good work on the convoy. Thank you, Admiral. But I'm guessing you didn't call to offer congratulations. No. Vasquez's expression grew serious. I have a mission for you. High risk, high reward. The kind of mission that could change the entire war. Chen felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He had heard those words before. They usually meant that people were going to die. Tell me, our intelligence network has identified a Dominion research facility on a moon called Keth 7. It's where they develop new weapons technology, heavy security, minimal approach vectors, and a garrison of over 2,000 soldiers. Sounds impossible. That's what makes it interesting. Vasquez's eyes gleamed. The facility contains something we need. Technical specifications for the pillars of authority. Complete blueprints, including defensive systems, power sources, and structural weaknesses. If we get those specs, we can plan a strike that takes out all 200 pillars at once. Chen was silent for a moment. The pillars of authority. He knew about them, of course. Everyone did. They were the backbone of the Dominion Empire, the ancient technology that allowed them to coordinate their vast forces across thousands of light years. Taking them out would cripple the enemy's ability to fight as a unified force, but attacking them without knowing their vulnerabilities would be suicide. What's the plan? He asked. Infiltration. The facility uses servitor species for menial labor. We've made contact with a group of Kralith workers on the inside. They can get a small team into the facility, but extraction will be on your own. How small is small? 4 people. Any more would attract too much attention. Chen closed his eyes. 4 people against 2,000 soldiers, trying to steal the most sensitive secrets in the Empire, with no guaranteed way out. It was insane. It was necessary. "I'll do it," he said. Chen chose his team carefully. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka, his pilot and one of the best fighters he knew. She was small and quick, with reflexes that bordered on supernatural. She could put a shot between an enemy's eyes while hanging upside down from a ventilation shaft. Sergeant Boris Petrov, his weapons officer, a giant of a man who could carry twice his weight in equipment and had once held off an entire Dominion platoon with nothing but a broken rifle and creative use of explosives. Dr. Amara Okafor, his medic, gentle and caring, but with a core of steel. She had saved lives under fire more times than anyone could count, and her calm presence had a way of keeping people focused when everything went wrong. Together, the 4 of them had been through more battles than any of them cared to remember. They trusted each other with their lives. They would need that trust. The approach to Keth 7 was tense. Tanaka piloted a captured Dominion shuttle, its identification codes provided by their Kraloth allies. Chen sat in the back with Petrov and Okafor, checking and rechecking their equipment. "You know," Petrov said, "I always wanted to visit a secret enemy base. It's been on my list. Right below get eaten by alien monster and die in fiery explosion. At least you'll cross one off," Tanaka called back. "Let's try for 0 out of 3, Chen said. "Focus. We get in, we get the data, we get out. Simple. Simple," Okafor repeated. "Right. Nothing ever goes wrong with simple plans." The shuttle descended through Keth 7's thin atmosphere. Below them, the research facility sprawled across the moon's surface like a metal spider, its legs formed by connecting tunnels and its body a massive central structure bristling with sensor arrays. They landed at a service entrance, presenting their forged documents to a bored Dominion guard. The guard barely glanced at them before waving them through. Servitor workers were beneath his notice. Inside the facility, they were met by a Kraloth named Gorthak. He was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that shifted from green to brown depending on the light. His eyes were intelligent and watchful. "Follow me," he rumbled. "Move quickly. There is a shift change in 20 minutes. We must reach the data center before then." They moved through service corridors and maintenance tunnels, avoiding main hallways where Dominion soldiers patrolled. Gorthak knew every camera blind spot, every guard schedule, every shortcut. He had worked in this facility for 30 years, invisible and unremarkable, waiting for this moment. "Why are you helping us?" Chen asked as they walked. Gorthak was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "When I was young, my people had a homeworld. It was beautiful, great forests, deep lakes, mountains that touched the sky. Then the Dominion came. They took our planet, killed our warriors, and scattered the rest of us as slaves across their empire." He paused. "I was 3 years old. I have no memory of my home. I only know it exists because my mother told me stories before she died." Chen felt a surge of kinship. "We lost our home too. I know. But you did something we never could. You fought back." Gorthak's eyes met Chen's. "When I heard about the humans who laughed at the Dominion's threats, I felt something I had not felt in decades. Hope. Perhaps it is foolish. Perhaps we will all die. But I would rather die fighting than live forever as a slave." They reached the data center without incident. It was a large room filled with computer terminals and storage systems, guarded by only 2 soldiers who were quickly and quietly neutralized. "I'll handle the extraction," Chen said. "Tanaka, Petrov, watch the doors. Okafor, be ready to move." He plugged a specialized device into the main terminal and began downloading everything he could find. Technical specifications for the pillars, defensive protocols, power requirements, structural diagrams. The data flowed into his device like water into a cup. "How long?" Tanaka asked. 5 minutes. 4 minutes passed. Then alarm sirens began to scream. "That's not good," Petrov observed. The door burst open and Dominion soldiers poured in. Tanaka and Petrov opened fire, their weapons cutting down the first wave. But more kept coming. "Chen," Tanaka shouted. "We need to go. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10. The device beeped. "Got it. Move." They fought their way out of the data center, leaving a trail of bodies behind them. Gorthak led them through a different route, but the facility was on full alert now. Soldiers were everywhere. They reached a junction and ran straight into a Dominion patrol. The firefight was brutal and brief. Petrov took a hit to his shoulder but kept fighting. Okafor patched him up on the run. "The hangar is this way," Gorthak said. "Your shuttle." A explosion rocked the corridor. Part of the ceiling collapsed, separating them. Chen found himself on one side with Tanaka and Okafor. Petrov and Gorthak were on the other. "Go," Petrov shouted through the rubble. "We'll find another way. Boris, there's no time, Commander. Get that data to the Admiral. We'll meet you at the ship." Chen hesitated for only a moment. Then he turned and ran. They reached the hangar to find it swarming with Dominion soldiers. Their shuttle was surrounded, clearly marked as hostile. There was no way to reach it. "There," Tanaka said, pointing. A Dominion fighter sat near the edge of the hangar, its pilot just climbing out. "I can fly that." They moved fast. Tanaka disabled the pilot with a well-placed shot. Chen and Okafor provided cover fire as she powered up the stolen fighter. They piled in, barely fitting in a cockpit designed for two, and Tanaka launched them into the sky. "Petrov," Chen said into his communicator. "We're out." "Where are you?" Static. Then a voice, weak but defiant. "Can't make it, Commander. Too many of them." An explosion in the background. "Gorthak is down. I'm the only one left. Hold on. We'll come back for you." "No." Petrov's voice was firm. "You have the data. That's what matters. Get it to Vasquez. Let her win this war." "Boris, it's been an honor, Commander. Tell the others." He laughed, and it was his big, booming laugh. "Even now, tell them I died with a smile on my face. The Dominion can't take that from me." The connection cut off. Moments later, a massive explosion bloomed on the moon's surface, the facility's reactor going critical. Chen knew without being told that Petrov had done something to cause it. Tanaka flew the stolen fighter back to the Defiant Hope in silence. No one spoke the entire way. When they finally reached safety, Chen delivered the data to Admiral Vasquez and gave his report. She listened, without interrupting. "Sergeant Petrov and our Kralith ally gave their lives to get this information," Chen concluded. His voice was steady, but his hands shook. "I hope it was worth it." Vasquez was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "I knew Boris Petrov. He was one of the first to volunteer after the scattering. He told me he had nothing left to lose, so he might as well make his death mean something." She looked at the data device in her hand. "He succeeded. This information will save billions of lives. The Dominion killed one man today. That man just signed the death warrant for their empire." She stepped forward and placed a hand on Chen's shoulder. "Grieve for him. Remember him. Then get back to work. We have a war to win." Chen nodded slowly. "Yes, Admiral." In the weeks that followed, the stolen data was analyzed, processed, and distributed to every human cell and allied group across the galaxy. The pillars of authority, it turned out, were vulnerable in ways the Dominion had never suspected. Their power sources could be disrupted with the right frequencies. Their defensive systems had blind spots. Their structures were strong, but not invincible. 200 targets, 200 strike teams. One simultaneous attack that would bring an empire to its knees. Admiral Vasquez set the date. 8 months from the raid. 8 months to prepare. 8 months to train. 8 months to position forces and coordinate logistics. And then, at last, they would stop hiding. They would return. During those 8 months, Chen threw himself into his work. He trained new recruits. He led more raids. He helped coordinate with allied species. He did everything he could to keep busy, to keep his mind away from the memories of friends lost. But at night, when the work was done and the silence closed in, he thought of Petrov, of Gorthak, of all the others who had died so that humanity could have a chance. He made a promise to them in the darkness. "We will not waste your sacrifice. We will make them pay for every drop of blood they've spilled. And when this war is over, your names will be remembered." The 8 months passed faster than he expected, and then, one morning, he woke to find a message waiting on his terminal. It was from Admiral Vasquez. 2 words. "It's time." Across the galaxy, billions of humans and their allies received the same message. In hidden bases and disguised ships, in servitor camps and occupied worlds, People who had waited years for this moment felt their hearts begin to race. The return was about to begin. And High Overlord Xyrith, secure in his palace on what had once been Earth, had no idea what was coming. In his arrogance, he had declared the human threat contained. He had told his empire that the insurgency was a nuisance, nothing more. He had celebrated victory prematurely. He was about to learn the cost of that mistake. The darkness of space was about to catch fire, and at the center of it all, Admiral Elena Vasquez stood before a holographic display showing 200 glowing targets. She had waited 3 years for this moment. She had sacrificed more than she could bear to think about. But now, finally, it was time. All teams, she said, her voice broadcasting across secure channels to every corner of the galaxy. Operation Prometheus is go. May fortune favor the bold. She closed the channel and allowed herself one moment of silence. Then she headed to the bridge. She had a war to win. High Overlord Xyrith sat upon his throne in the Great Hall of Geneva, watching the celebrations on his display screen. Today was Victory Day, the 3rd anniversary of humanity's defeat. Across the Dominion Empire, billions of subjects gathered to celebrate the conquest. Parades marched through the streets of occupied worlds. Speeches praised the glory of the Empire. Feasts were held in honor of Dominion soldiers. Xyrith himself was scheduled to address the Empire in 1 hour. His speech was prepared, his words carefully chosen to remind his subjects of Dominion power and human weakness. But something was bothering him. The reports from the front had grown strange in recent weeks. Human attacks had decreased significantly. Patrol routes went unmolested. Supply convoys arrived safely. It was as if the insurgency had simply stopped. Some of his advisors called it victory. They said the humans had finally exhausted themselves, that their rebellion had run out of steam. Xyrith was not so sure. He had studied humans for 3 years now. He had read their history, analyzed their tactics, tried to understand how their minds worked. And one thing he had learned was that humans never simply gave up. They might retreat, they might hide, they might go quiet, but they never stopped fighting. The silence worried him. High Overlord, his aide interrupted. The broadcast is ready. The entire Empire awaits your words. Xyrith pushed his concerns aside. Whatever the humans were planning, it could wait. Today was a day of celebration. He rose from his throne and walked to the balcony overlooking the city. Below him, thousands of Dominion soldiers and administrators had gathered to hear his speech. Billions more watched through screens across the Empire. He began to speak. 3 years ago, a species called humanity defied the Dominion. They laughed at our ultimatum. They fled rather than surrender. They scattered into the void like vermin fleeing a fire. His voice echoed through the square and across the stars. Many called them brave. I called them fools. He paused for effect. Today, we celebrate their defeat. The human worlds belong to us. Their civilization is dust. Their people are scattered remnants, hiding in the darkness, dying slowly of hunger and hopelessness. They thought they could defy an empire that has ruled for 50,000 years. They thought. The lights flickered. Xyrith stopped mid-sentence. Across the square, across the city, across the planet. Every light flickered in perfect synchronization. Then the screens changed. Every display in the Empire, every monitor, every communicator, every projection system, suddenly showed the same thing. Ships, human ships, not dozens, not hundreds, thousands. They emerged from hiding places across the galaxy like ghosts materializing from the shadows, from asteroid fields and gas giant cores, from rogue planets and deep space stations, from places the Dominion had never thought to look. The feeds showed them appearing everywhere, a tide of vessels rising from the darkness. Then a face appeared on every screen. Admiral Elena Vasquez looked older than she had 3 years ago. Her hair had gone gray at the temples. Lines of exhaustion and grief marked her features, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. High Overlord Xyrith, she said. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. You declared victory today. You celebrated our defeat. She smiled, and it was not a friendly smile. You celebrated too soon. Xyrith's hearts began to pound. For 3 years, we have hidden. We have waited. We have prepared. You thought we were dying. You thought we were broken. Vasquez leaned forward. You were wrong. The image behind her changed, showing a map of Dominion space with 200 points of light scattered across it. These are the pillars of authority. The backbone of your empire. The technology that lets you coordinate your fleets, communicate with your worlds, maintain your control over thousands of systems. She paused. Right now, at this very moment, strike teams are attacking every single one of them. Xyrith's blood ran cold. We didn't retreat, Xyrith. We prepared. We recruited. We planned. And now. Vasquez's smile widened. Now we return. The broadcast ended. For a moment, there was only silence. Then Xyrith's aide rushed to his side, his face pale with terror. High Overlord, we're receiving reports from across the Empire. Attacks on the pillars. Coordinated strikes. Our communications. Show me. The tactical display lit up with incoming data, and Xyrith watched in horror as the scope of the attack became clear. Pillar after pillar was under assault. Some were being attacked by human ships. Others were being sabotaged from within by servitor workers who had been waiting for this moment for years. Still others were being overrun by ground forces, not just humans, but Kralith, Morath, Sylvani, Vorn, and a dozen other species who had finally risen against their masters. The Dominion had believed their servants were broken and obedient. They were wrong. How? Xyrith demanded. How did they coordinate this without us knowing? No one had an answer. Across the galaxy, the attacks proceeded with devastating precision. On a volcanic moon called Keth 1-2, Commander Marcus Chen led his team through the corridors of a pillar facility. They had landed under cover of a meteor storm, their ship hidden among the falling rocks. Now they fought their way toward the pillar's core, leaving Dominion bodies in their wake. Left corridor, 2 hostiles. Lieutenant Tanaka called out. Chen moved before she finished speaking, his weapon firing twice. 2 Dominion soldiers fell. Clear. Keep moving. Behind them, Dr. Okafor followed with a specialized charge designed to overload the pillar's power systems. It was their only bomb, and it had to be placed precisely at the core. They encountered fierce resistance at every turn. The Dominion knew what was at stake and fought desperately to protect their infrastructure. But Chen's team had trained for this mission for months. They knew every corridor, every defensive position, every possible approach. They reached the core room and found it guarded by a full platoon of Dominion soldiers. We don't have time for a prolonged fight, Chen said. We're going through. Tanaka nodded grimly. On your mark. Chen took a deep breath. Then he stepped into the open. Hey, he shouted. Looking for me? Every weapon in the room swung toward him. And in that moment of distraction, Tanaka came in from the side, her shots precise and deadly. Okafor followed through a ventilation shaft, dropping behind the enemy lines. The firefight was brief and brutal. When it was over, Chen had a burn across his arm and Tanaka was limping from a grazing shot to her leg. But the Dominion soldiers were down. Okafor placed the charge at the core's base. 2 minutes. Then let's not be here, Chen said. Move. They ran. Behind them, the charge detonated. The pillar's power systems went critical. A chain reaction ripped through the facility, and a pillar of fire rose into the volcanic sky. 1 down, 199 to go. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. On space stations and planetary facilities, in orbital installations and deep space arrays, the pillars of authority died one by one. Not all the attacks succeeded. On a frozen world called Therax 3, a human strike team was overwhelmed by Dominion reinforcements. They fought to the last, taking as many enemies as they could with them, and in the end, they triggered their explosives manually, sacrificing themselves to complete the mission. On the gas giant Venak, a sabotage team was discovered before they could reach their target. They barricaded themselves in a storage room and held off the enemy for 3 hours, long enough for a second team to approach from another angle and finish the job. On a station orbiting the Dominion throne world itself, a young pilot named Yuki Tanaka, sister to the lieutenant who served under Chen, flew a damaged fighter straight into the pillar's core. Her last transmission was a laugh and a single word. Gotcha. The Dominion fought back with everything they had. But they were scattered, confused, caught completely off guard. Their vaunted coordination crumbled as the pillars fell, leaving their fleets isolated and their commanders unable to communicate. By the end of the day, 197 pillars had been destroyed. It was the most devastating single attack in the history of the Dominion Empire. High Overlord Xyrith received the reports in stunned silence. His throne room, once a symbol of absolute power, now felt like a tomb. 197. His aide whispered. Almost all of them. What of the survivors? The 3 that remain, heavily damaged but functional. We are attempting to reroute critical communications through them, but, the aide hesitated, our ability to coordinate fleet movements has been reduced by over 90%. Individual commanders are operating independently. We have no way to issue unified orders. Zyrith closed his eyes. In a single day, the humans had done what no enemy had managed in 50,000 years. They had crippled the Dominion's ability to function as an empire. The human fleet, he said. Where is it now? Scattered across our territory. They're engaging isolated patrol groups, seizing supply depots, liberating servitor populations. The aide paused, and they appear to be converging on a single point. Where? The aide's voice trembled. Here, High Overlord. They're coming here. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Resolution. Around her, the combined human and allied fleet moved through space in perfect formation. 2,000 ships of every size and configuration, flying together for the first time since the scattering. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. Status report, she said. All strike teams have reported in. Her tactical officer replied. 197 pillars destroyed. The Dominion's command structure is in chaos. Their fleets are scattered and isolated. He paused. We've also received reports of uprisings on over 200 servitor worlds. The Kralith, the Morath, the Sylvani, they're all rising up. Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. The fire they had lit was spreading faster than even she had hoped. Casualties? Heavy, Admiral. We lost over 100 teams in the attacks. Thousands of fighters dead. The smile faded. The price of victory was always paid in blood. They will be remembered, she said quietly. Every single one of them. Yes. Admiral. She turned her attention to the main display, which showed the approaching target. Vethkar Prime, the Dominion homeworld. It was a massive planet, dark and forbidding, orbited by defense stations and shipyards and the largest fleet the Dominion had ever assembled. 3,000 warships waited for them there. Even with the chaos caused by the pillar attacks, it was a formidable force. We're outnumbered. Her tactical officer observed. We've always been outnumbered. It's never stopped us before. Vasquez straightened up. Open a channel. All ships. The communication light blinked on. This is Admiral Vasquez to all forces. In a few hours, we will engage the Dominion fleet over their homeworld. We will be facing their largest fleet, their most experienced commanders, their most advanced technology. By any rational measure, we should not be able to win. She paused, letting her words sink in. But humans have never been rational. We're the species that walked out of caves with nothing but rocks and sharp sticks and conquered a planet. We're the species that split the atom and touched the stars. We're the species that, when faced with an ultimatum from an empire of 3,000 worlds, responded with a rude gesture and a laugh. A chuckle rippled across the fleet. The Dominion thinks they know us. They think we're primitive, weak, easy to break. They've learned nothing from 3 years of war. Her voice hardened. Today, we teach them their final lesson. She let the words hang in the air for a moment. They demanded our surrender. They burned our worlds. They killed our families and friends. They thought they could erase us from the galaxy. Her fist clenched at her side. They were wrong. We're still here. We're still fighting. And now, at last, we're taking the war to their doorstep. This is for Earth, for our colonies, for everyone we've lost, for every species the Dominion has crushed under their heel. She raised her chin. Today, we end this. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you try to break humanity. All ships, prepare for battle. She closed the channel and turned to her bridge crew. Take us in. The human fleet accelerated toward Vethkar Prime, toward the largest battle in galactic history, toward destiny. Behind them, across the smoking ruins of 200 pillars, across worlds where servitor species rose up against their masters, across an empire that was crumbling before their eyes. The word spread. The humans were back, and this time, they had come to finish what they started. High Overlord Zyrith watched the approaching fleet on his tactical display. He had gathered every ship he could summon, every soldier he could conscript, every weapon he could find. 3,000 warships formed a defensive line around his homeworld. It should have been enough. Against any other enemy, it would have been enough. But these were not any other enemy. "High Overlord," his aide said. "The human fleet is entering weapons range." Xyrith rose from his throne. For 50,000 years, the Dominion had ruled the stars. For 50,000 years, no enemy had ever reached this world. Today, that record would be broken. "All ships," he commanded. "Prepare to engage." The final battle was about to begin, and somewhere in the human fleet, Admiral Vasquez watched the Dominion forces arrange themselves against her. She saw their numbers, their firepower, their desperate determination to protect their home. She smiled. "They still don't understand," she murmured. "They still think this is about ships and weapons and numbers." She looked at her bridge crew, at the tired faces of men and women who had fought for 3 years without rest. They had lost everything. They had sacrificed everything, and they were still here, still fighting, still refusing to give up. That was what the Dominion had never understood. That was what no enemy had ever understood about humanity. It was not about the technology. It was not about the resources. It was not about the size of the fleet. It was about the fire that burned in human hearts. The stubborn refusal to accept defeat. The willingness to fight against impossible odds because surrender was simply not an option. "All ships," Vasquez said, her voice calm and steady. "Weapons free." And the void exploded into war. Space erupted into fire. 3,000 Dominion warships faced 2,000 human and allied vessels over the dark sphere of Vethkar Prime. The void between them filled with missiles and energy beams, explosions and debris, death and destruction on a scale the galaxy had never witnessed. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Resolution, watching the battle unfold on her tactical display. Red icons marked Dominion ships. Blue marked her own. Green marked her allies, the Kralith, the Morath, the Sylvani, and a dozen other species who had risen against their masters. The display was chaos. Ships died every second, reduced to expanding clouds of wreckage and frozen bodies. The casualties were terrible on both sides, but the humans were winning. Not through superior firepower, the Dominion still outgunned them significantly. Not through better technology, their ships were still patchwork vessels held together by necessity and stubborn will. They were winning through sheer audacity. Human pilots performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. They flew their ships into gaps in the enemy formation that were not gaps at all, trusting reflexes and luck to carry them through. They took shots that had no chance of hitting and hit anyway. They sacrificed themselves to protect their comrades, turning damaged ships into weapons by crashing them into enemy vessels. The Dominion had never faced anything like it. Their commanders, trained in centuries of tactical doctrine, found themselves outmaneuvered by an enemy that did not follow any rules they understood. "Forward group is breaking through Sector 7, the tactical officer reported. "Commander Chen's squadron has destroyed the Dominion command ship in Sector 12. The enemy left flank is collapsing." Vasquez nodded grimly. "Tell Chen to press the advantage. We need to reach the flagship, the Eternal Dominion." Xyrith's personal command ship hung at the center of the Dominion formation. It was massive, nearly twice the size of the Resolution, bristling with weapons and protected by the heaviest shields in the Empire. If they could take it, the battle would be over. If they could reach it. High Overlord Xyrith watched the battle from his throne with mounting disbelief. His fleet was larger, his ships were stronger, his commanders were experienced veterans of 100 campaigns, and yet he was losing. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They are outnumbered. They are outgunned. How are they doing this?" His aide had no answer. None of them did. The truth was simple, though none of them could understand it. The Dominion fought to preserve an empire. The humans fought for survival. The Dominion followed orders. The humans followed their hearts. The Dominion feared death. The humans had already lost everything that mattered. There is nothing more dangerous than an enemy who has nothing left to lose. "High Overlord," a tactical officer called out. "The human flagship is approaching our position. They've broken through the outer defensive line." Xyrith's eyes narrowed. "The Resolution." Admiral Vasquez. "Yes, High Overlord. She appears to be making a direct attack on our vessel." For a moment, something like respect flickered in Xyrith's ancient eyes. The human commander was coming for him personally. It was foolish. It was reckless. It was very, very human. "All batteries, target the Resolution. Destroy it." The Eternal Dominion opened fire with everything it had. Energy beams lanced out, seeking the human flagship. Missiles swarmed through the void. The fire was overwhelming, enough to destroy a dozen ships, but the Resolution did not face it alone. Commander Marcus Chen brought his squadron in from the left, drawing fire away from the flagship. Kralith warships charged from the right, their heavy guns blazing. Sylvani energy beings, freed from their containment prisons, swept through the Dominion ranks like avenging spirits, disrupting weapons and shields wherever they passed. And in the center of it all, Admiral Vasquez drove her ship forward through a hell of fire and death. The Resolution took hit after hit. Decks collapsed, systems failed, crew members died at their stations. But the ship kept moving, kept fighting, kept advancing. Hull breach on Deck 7. The damage control officer reported. Deck 9 is venting atmosphere. Primary weapons are offline. Keep going, Vasquez ordered. We're almost there. Admiral, the ship can't take much more. She only has to take a little more. Vasquez gripped the arms of her command chair. All power to forward shields. Ramming speed. The bridge crew exchanged glances. They knew what she was asking. They knew the cost. They obeyed anyway. The Resolution accelerated toward the Eternal Dominion. A burning spear aimed at the heart of the enemy fleet. Dominion gunners poured fire into it, but the ship refused to die. It crossed the final distance in seconds that felt like hours, and then it struck. The impact was catastrophic. The Resolution tore into the side of the Eternal Dominion, ripping through hull plating and bulkheads, embedding itself deep in the massive ship's structure. Both vessels shuddered and groaned as they became locked together. On the bridge of the Resolution, Vasquez rose from her chair. Blood ran down her face from a cut above her eye. Around her sparks flew and fires burned, but she was smiling. Boarding parties, she said. With me. She led them personally, through corridors filled with smoke and debris, stepping over the bodies of the fallen. Admiral Elena Vasquez led a team of 50 soldiers into the heart of the enemy flagship. They fought through Dominion defenders with ruthless efficiency, taking casualties with every room they cleared. Vasquez did not slow down. She could not slow down. The entire battle, the entire war, the entire future of her species depended on what happened in the next few minutes. They reached the throne room of the Eternal Dominion. The great doors stood before them, sealed and guarded by Zyreth's personal guards, elite soldiers in heavy armor, wielding weapons designed to kill at a touch. There were 30 of them, the best the Dominion had to offer. Vasquez's team numbered barely a dozen by now. Admiral, one of her soldiers said. We can't. We can, she said. We will. She raised her weapon and charged. The fight that followed would become legend. Humans against Dominion, flesh against armor, desperation against duty. Vasquez's soldiers died one by one, but they took Dominion guards with them. They fought with guns and knives and bare hands. They fought until they could not fight anymore, and then they kept fighting. When it was over, Vasquez stood alone before the throne room doors. Her weapon was empty. Her body was broken. She had been shot 3 times, stabbed twice, and was bleeding from wounds she could not count. But the guards were dead. She pushed open the doors. High Overlord Zyreth waited for her inside. The throne room was vast and dark, lit by strange glowing crystals that cast shifting shadows across the walls. Zyreth sat upon his throne, watching her approach with ancient, calculating eyes. Admiral Vasquez, he said. His voice was calm, almost conversational. I have followed your career with great interest. You are unlike any enemy I have faced. Vasquez kept walking, each step an effort of pure will. I'll take that as a compliment. It was not intended as one. Zyreth rose from his throne. He was tall, far taller than her, and his body radiated power despite his age. You have fought well, better than I believed possible for your species. But surely you can see that you have already lost? Lost? Vasquez laughed, though it hurt to do so. I've just destroyed the heart of your empire. Your pillars are gone. Your servants are rising against you. Your fleet is being torn apart as we speak. In what universe have I lost? In this one. Zyreth spread his arms. Even if you kill me, another will take my place. The Dominion has ruled for 50,000 years. It will adapt. It will rebuild. It will endure. His eyes glowed with cold certainty. The strong always rule the weak. It is the nature of the universe. Vasquez shook her head slowly. That's where you're wrong. Am I? Completely. She took another step forward, closing the distance between them. You think strength is about power, about weapons and ships and armies, about conquering and controlling and crushing anyone who stands in your way. She met his gaze without fear. Humans don't measure strength that way. We measure it in love, in sacrifice, in the willingness to fight for something bigger than ourselves. Her voice hardened. Every person who died fighting your empire, every soldier, every pilot, every saboteur, they weren't just following orders. They were choosing to give their lives for the people they loved, for the future they believed in. Xyrith's eyes narrowed. Noble words. But words do not win wars. No, Vasquez agreed. Actions do. She moved faster than he expected. Despite her wounds, despite her exhaustion, despite everything, she lunged forward with a speed that caught the ancient overlord off guard. They fought. Xyrith was stronger than her. Faster. His claws could tear through metal. His reflexes had been honed by centuries of combat. By every measure, he should have killed her in seconds. But Vasquez refused to die. She ducked his strikes and returned her own. She took hits that should have ended her and kept fighting. She fought with every ounce of stubbornness that her species was famous for, drawing on reserves of strength that she did not know she had. And slowly, impossibly, she began to win. Xyrith faltered. His certainty cracked. For the first time in his immortal life, he faced an opponent who simply would not stop, no matter what he did. "What are you?" he gasped. Vasquez's answer was simple. "Human." She drove a blade into his chest. Xyrith staggered backward, staring at the weapon protruding from his body with something like shock. Black blood welled around the wound. "This changes nothing," he snarled. The Dominion is finished." Vasquez's voice was cold. "Your empire ends today. Not because we're stronger than you, not because we have better weapons or bigger fleets." She met his dying eyes. "It ends because we chose to be free. Because we refused to kneel. Because when you demanded our surrender, we laughed in your face." Xyrith fell to his knees. His eyes dimmed. "You were right about one thing," Vasquez continued. "Another will rise to take your place. There will always be tyrants who want to rule through fear. There will always be empires that try to crush the weak." She leaned close. "And there will always be people like us, people who refuse to accept it, people who fight back, no matter the odds." Xyrith's last words were barely a whisper. "Then you will fight forever, if that's what it takes." Vasquez straightened up. "Yes, we will." The High Overlord of the Dominion breathed his last and was still. Vasquez stood alone in the throne room, surrounded by the corpses of an empire. Her body screamed with pain. Her vision was fading. She had given everything she had, but she had won. Outside, the battle continued. But word spread quickly through the Dominion fleet that Xyrith was dead. Some ships surrendered immediately. Others tried to flee. A few fought on with desperate fury. But without coordination or leadership, they were quickly overwhelmed. Within hours, the largest fleet battle in galactic history was over. Humanity had won. Commander Marcus Chen found Admiral Vasquez sitting on Xyrith's throne, barely conscious. Her wounds were severe. Dr. Okafor, who had led a second boarding party, rushed to her side. "Admiral," Chen knelt beside her. "We won. The Dominion fleet is surrendering. We've won." Vasquez smiled weakly. "I know. I felt it." She looked at him with tired eyes. "How many did we lose?" Chen hesitated. "Hundreds of ships. Thousands of people." He paused. "The Resolution is gone. She broke apart after the impact. She did her job." Vasquez closed her eyes. They all did. The evacuation from the Eternal Dominion was chaotic but successful. Vasquez was rushed to a medical ship where doctors worked for hours to save her life. She had lost too much blood, suffered too much damage. By all rights, she should have died. But she was human. And humans, as the galaxy was learning, did not die easily. 1 year later, Earth was different now. The scars of Dominion occupation still marked the planet. Collapsed buildings, abandoned facilities, memorials to those who had died. But life was returning. Cities were being rebuilt. Farms were being replanted. People were coming home. The Dominion Empire had fractured completely in the months following Xyrith's death. Some worlds had simply declared independence. Others had joined the Free Galactic Coalition, the new alliance that humanity had formed with its allies. The servitor species, once slaves, now governed their own worlds for the first time in centuries. It was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still challenges, still a universe full of problems to solve. But the shadow of the Dominion no longer hung over the galaxy. Admiral Elena Vasquez, now President of the Terran Republic, stood before an audience of millions. Representatives from 100 species filled the United Nations building in Geneva, the same hall where Xyrith had once declared humanity conquered. The irony was not lost on her. 3 years ago, she began, we faced the impossible. An empire of 3,000 worlds demanded our surrender. They gave us 72 hours to submit or die. They expected us to kneel. A murmur went through the crowd. They all knew this story. They had lived it. We chose a different path. We scattered. We hid. We fought from the shadows, striking where they least expected, refusing to give up no matter how hopeless things seemed. She paused. Many of us did not survive to see this day. We lost friends, family, entire worlds. The cost of our victory was paid in blood and tears and grief beyond measure. Silence fell across the hall. But we are here. Against all odds, against an enemy that had destroyed 17 species before us. We are here. Not because we were stronger. Not because we had better weapons or more ships. We are here because of something the Dominion never understood. She looked out at the gathered representatives, humans and aliens alike, former enemies now united in peace. We fought for something worth dying for. We fought for freedom, for each other, for the chance to build a future where no one would ever have to face what we faced. Her voice strengthened. And that is worth more than all the ships and weapons in the universe. She turned to face the camera that broadcast her words across the galaxy. To those who would threaten the free peoples of this coalition, I have a message. We did not survive the Dominion by being weak. We did not defeat them by being passive. We are a coalition of species who have learned the hardest lesson the universe has to teach. That freedom must be defended. Always. At any cost. Try us. Attack our worlds. Threaten our people. She smiled, and it was the smile of a species forged in fire. You will find that we do not forget. We do not forgive. And we do not surrender. They demanded we kneel. We laughed. They attacked. We disappeared. They thought they had won. Her eyes blazed. They were wrong. And to anyone who thinks they can succeed where the Dominion failed, we'll be waiting. The hall erupted in applause. Humans and aliens cheered together, united by shared struggle and hard-won peace. The sound echoed through the building, through the city, through a world that had been lost and reclaimed. Later, after the speeches were over and the crowds had dispersed, Vasquez stood alone on the observation deck. She looked up at the stars, the same stars she had watched 3 years ago, waiting for the Dominion fleet to arrive. Commander Chen joined her. He was older now, his face marked by the same years of war that had aged them all. But he was alive. Against all odds, he was alive. Hell of a speech, he said. It's what they needed to hear. Vasquez was quiet for a moment. Do you think it will last? The peace, I mean? Chen considered the question. Honestly? No. There will be other threats, other enemies. That's just how the universe works. Then why did we fight so hard? If it's just going to happen again, Chen smiled. Because fighting is how we buy time. Time to build, to grow, to prepare. Time for children to be born and live without fear, even if it's only for a generation. He looked up at the stars, and because when the next threat comes, we'll face it the same way we faced this one. Together, Vasquez nodded slowly. Together, they stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere out there, in the vast darkness of space, billions of humans and their allies were rebuilding their lives, raising families, telling stories of the war to children who would only know it from history. The scars would take time to heal. Some would never heal at all. But life went on, stubbornly and beautifully, as it always did. Admiral Elena Vasquez, soldier, leader, survivor, allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten in the years of war. Peace. It would not last forever. Nothing did. But for now, in this moment, it was enough. She turned away from the window and headed back inside. There was work to be done. A coalition to build. A future to shape. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice laughed. The same laugh she had given 3 years ago. When an empire demanded her surrender and she had responded with defiance, she would always have that laugh. It was, after all, what made her human. And humans, as the galaxy had learned, never stopped fighting. They never stopped hoping, and they never, ever, stopped laughing in the face of impossible odds. That was their greatest weapon. That was their legacy. That was what it meant to be human.